The planet Chronos 7 was a place where time behaved strangely. Here, the sun set in the east, and the stars moved backward across the sky. Days lasted either 3 hours or 30. Scientists from across the galaxy called it a temporal laboratory, but no one could explain why such anomalies occurred. That's why the Chronos Expedition had come, a team of 6 researchers tasked with finding answers. Captain Darius Vane stood at the edge of a massive crater, his eyes fixed on the strange object at its bottom. It was an artifact, a massive sphere of gleaming metal, covered in intricate patterns that resembled clockwork gears. The gears moved on their own, as if the sphere were alive. "What do you think?" Darius turned to his team. "It's incredible," whispered Eliza Carter, the expedition's archaeologist. "These symbols, they resemble the language of an ancient civilization we call the Keepers of Time. But I've never seen anything like this." "Could this be what we're looking for?" asked Kyle Renner, the engineer, already preparing the equipment to descend into the crater. "Only one way to find out," Darius said, his voice calm but his eyes gleaming with excitement. The descent into the crater was more challenging than they had anticipated. The air was thick, charged with electricity, and the ground crunched beneath their boots, littered with strange crystals that emitted a faint glow. When they finally reached the artifact, Eliza was the first to approach it. Her hand brushed against its surface, and she felt a slight vibrational pulse. "It's alive," she whispered. "What?" Darius frowned. "It responds to touch. Look." The sphere suddenly glowed with a bright light, and the patterns on its surface began to spin faster. The air around them hummed, and they felt time shift. "What was that?" Kyle asked, his voice tense. "I don't know," Darius replied, but there was something in his eyes, a mix of fear and awe. They brought the artifact back to their ship, but from that moment on, things started to go wrong. At first, it was small changes. The ship's clock showed the wrong time. Food in the fridge appeared and disappeared. Then came the visions. Darius woke up in the middle of the night, hearing voices. He stepped out of his cabin and saw something impossible. The ship's corridor was filled with people he had never seen before. They were translucent, like ghosts, and spoke languages he couldn't understand. "What kind of madness is this?" he whispered. "It's not madness," he heard Eliza's voice behind him. She stood there, her face pale. "It's the artifact. It's opening doors to other times." "Other times?" "Yes, other realities. But something's wrong. It's not just showing them, it's mixing them." Darius felt a chill run through his body. He looked down at his hand and saw it begin to dissolve, as if he were becoming a ghost himself. "What's happening to me?" he asked, but Eliza couldn't answer. She too was beginning to fade. The next morning, everything returned to normal. But they knew this was only the beginning. The artifact was more powerful than they had imagined, and now it was playing with them. The artifact was placed in the ship's main lab, secured behind a reinforced glass chamber. But no amount of containment could stop its influence. The team gathered around it, their faces a mix of fascination and fear. The sphere pulsed rhythmically, its gears spinning faster and slower in an unpredictable pattern. It was as if it were alive, breathing, thinking, waiting. "We need to understand how it works," Eliza said, her voice trembling with excitement. "This could be the key to everything. Time travel, alternate realities, even immortality. Or it could be the key to our destruction," Darius replied, his tone grim. "We've already seen what it can do. It's playing with us." Kyle, the engineer, stepped forward, his tools in hand. "Let me run some scans. If we can figure out its energy source, maybe we can control it." As Kyle worked, the rest of the team watched in silence. The air in the lab felt heavy, charged with an almost tangible tension. And then the artifact reacted. The sphere's light intensified, flooding the room with a blinding glow. The team shielded their eyes, but when the light faded, something was different. The lab was no longer the same. The walls were covered in strange, organic patterns, and the air smelled of ozone and decay. "What the hell?" Kyle muttered, his voice filled with disbelief. Eliza stepped closer to the artifact, her eyes wide. "It's changing reality. It's pulling us into another timeline." Darius grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Don't touch it. We don't know what it's capable of." But it was too late. The artifact's light flared again, and the team was thrown into a whirlwind of images and sensations. They saw glimpses of other worlds, alternate versions of their ship, their lives, even themselves. Some versions were utopias, filled with peace and prosperity. Others were nightmares, ravaged by war and destruction. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the vision ended. The team found themselves back in the lab, but something was wrong. The artifact was gone. "Where is it?" Eliza asked, her voice filled with panic. "I don't know," Darius replied, his eyes scanning the room. "But I think it's inside us." Over the next few days, the team began to experience the artifact's influence in terrifying new ways. Time itself seemed to bend and warp around them. One moment, they would be in the lab, and the next, they would find themselves in a different part of the ship, or even a different timeline altogether. Kyle was the first to lose his grip on reality. He started seeing double, his own reflection moving independently of him. "It's like there's another me," he said, his voice filled with fear. "And he's trying to take over." Eliza, too, began to change. Her memories became fragmented, her sense of self slipping away. "I can't tell what's real anymore," she confessed to Darius. "It's like I'm living 1,000 lives at once." Darius tried to hold the team together, but even he wasn't immune. He started hearing voices, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. They spoke in languages he didn't understand, but their message was clear: "You are not in control." One night, Darius woke up to find himself standing in the ship's cargo hold. He didn't remember how he got there, but he wasn't alone. Eliza and Kyle were there too, their eyes vacant, their movements mechanical. "What's going on?" Darius asked, his voice filled with dread. Eliza turned to him, her expression blank. "The artifact is calling us. It wants us to complete the cycle." "What cycle?" Darius demanded, but Eliza didn't answer. Instead, she and Kyle began to move toward the center of the hold, where the artifact now sat, pulsating with a sinister light. Darius tried to stop them, but his body wouldn't obey. He could only watch as they reached out to the artifact, their hands trembling. And then, the light consumed them. When Darius woke up, he was back in his cabin. The artifact was gone, and so were Eliza and Kyle. The ship was silent, the corridors empty, but he knew they weren't really gone. They were still here somewhere, someone. And the artifact was waiting. Darius stood in the cargo hold, staring at the artifact. It was smaller now, its surface cracked and dull, but it still pulsed with a faint golden light. The whispers were gone, but the air was thick with tension. He knew what he had to do. "This ends now," he muttered, his voice filled with determination. He grabbed the plasma cutter from the wall and approached the artifact. His hands trembled, but his resolve was firm. He had already lost Eliza and Kyle. He wouldn't let the artifact take anything else. As he raised the cutter, the artifact reacted. The cracks on its surface began to glow, and the air around him hummed with energy. And then he heard it. A voice, but not the whispers. It was his own voice. "You can't destroy me. I am you." Darius froze, his heart pounding in his chest. "What are you talking about?" "I am the loop, the cycle. I am every decision you've ever made, every path you've ever taken. Destroy me, and you destroy yourself." Darius's mind raced. Was the artifact telling the truth? Was it a part of him? He thought back to everything that had happened. The visions, the alternate realities, the way time had bent and twisted around him. Had he been the one causing it all along? No, he whispered, his voice trembling. This isn't me. This is you. You're the one manipulating time. You're the one destroying everything. Am I? The artifact replied, its voice calm, almost mocking. Or are you just afraid to face the truth? Darius clenched his fists, his mind a whirlwind of doubt and fear. But then, he remembered Eliza's words. The cycle must be broken. He didn't know if the artifact was telling the truth. He didn't know if destroying it would destroy him. But he knew one thing. He couldn't let it continue. He couldn't let it consume anyone else. With a deep breath, he plunged the cutter into the artifact's surface. The light flared, blinding him, and the room was filled with a deafening roar. He felt himself being pulled into the artifact, his body dissolving into light. And then, everything went silent. When Darius opened his eyes, he was back in the lab. The artifact was gone, and so were Eliza and Kyle. The ship was silent, the corridors empty, but something was different. The air felt lighter. The whispers were gone. He looked down at his hands, half expecting them to dissolve. But they were solid, real. He had done it. He had broken the cycle. Or so he thought. As he made his way to the control room, he noticed something strange. The ship's clock was frozen, the screens showing static. And then he heard it, a faint, rhythmic hum. It was coming from the cargo hold. He followed the sound, his heart pounding in his chest. And there, in the center of the hold, was the artifact. It was smaller now, its surface cracked and dull. But it was still there. And it was still alive. Darius stared at the artifact, his mind racing. He had tried to destroy it, but it was still here. Was it indestructible? Or was it something else? Something that couldn't be destroyed because it was a part of him? He didn't know. But he knew one thing. The cycle wasn't broken. It was just beginning again. And this time, he was ready.